Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 219 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans, or at least many former college football fans, possibly.
Man, you got to stop with these negative intros here, Dad. It's becoming a trend. Yeah, you could tell he's in a great mood today, folks. But hey, we're going to try to keep our spirits good. You know, it's 2026. It's a new year. We're past all the bowl games and the second round of the college football playoffs. So we'll be talking about all that this week, including Nebraska's game against Utah in the Vegas Bowl. And then diving into our predictions for the semifinals in the college football playoff and where things kind of stand for the Nebraska football program as we're in the middle of this crazy transfer portal time.
Absolutely. Craziness.
Yes. And to kick things off, we're going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage. Sounds like Dad could use one. I'm going to go with my Golden Road Brewing Company Mango Cart.
And I'm going to do a Cerveza Pacifico Clara. Ooh. I love a little Mexican lager here.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Yes. And we are, of course, a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And we're going to kick things off today with the Nebraska football game. Now, unfortunately, I've been very busy here in this late December period, actually being involved with the Rose Parade here in Los Angeles. So I was not able to watch pretty much any of these games that we're going to be talking about today live, but I did watch the recaps afterwards and kind of filled myself in on what was going on. And of course, with the Nebraska game, we gave our predictions on a previous podcast, actually podcast episode 217. And I was being pretty pessimistic, just knowing how good Utah was. Although, admittedly, this was before all the Kyle Whittingham. Well, we knew Kyle Whittingham. We were speculating at the time that Kyle Whittingham was going to retire, that he was going to step aside from the program. Rumblings of that were already out there, but the whole him leaving for Michigan thing was not even a real rumor at the time that we gave this prediction a few weeks ago. But I predicted that we would lose pretty solidly, 40-17. Well, you predicted we would lose, but play more competitively, 27-17. And the final score of that one ended up being 44-22. So more along what I was thinking, where we'd lose by around 20 points. And got off to a good start, but unfortunately we weren't able to keep that momentum going.
That is true. And it's very frustrating to have watched the first two or three series of that game and feel like, okay, we're going to be able to be competitive with these guys, and then to watch the wheels completely come off on our offense and then not see any adjustment. That's probably my biggest takeaway and biggest frustration about this particular game. You know, I knew we were undermanned. They are a very talented football team. They had also some significant players who had stepped away, so it's not like they were at full strength either. And yet they were able to come to the table, execute, and they were super aggressive on defense. They often came at us with blitzes, with more guys than we had available to block, and our quarterback was not able to identify that situation and then have an appropriate, relief valve or place he could throw the ball that would give us a chance to be successful. And there were some, open receivers because of this blitzing, but our quarterback couldn't find it.
Right, of course. And this is TJ Lateef, who was our second string quarterback throughout the season, but became our first string because of Dylan Raiola's injury. And now Dylan Raiola's departure into the portal, all the more so we knew that TJ was going to be the main guy, though TJ was recovering from his own dinged up situation
hamstring,
from the hamstring, right, from the Iowa game. I will say, I talked to you after I was done with my work about the game, like, oh, I saw the score, and you're painting a pretty dismal picture. But actually, watching the highlights of the game, I saw good things to take away from it. For example, we were 15 of 28, passing it for 182 yards, and had 161 yards rushing for a total of 343. Now, Utah got 535, so we could
Yeah,
not stop them
yeah,
defensively. That was the big problem.
it
But
was.
offensively, we did get some things going. We had those two great drives at the start of the game, and then even in the fourth quarter, you'll recall that we got a good drive going, and
Yep.
TJ kind of went for a long ball that kind of floated on him a bit, and unfortunately that led to a pick. But we were in a position there where we could have gotten 3 points or potentially 7. And then we
Right.
did go down later in the fourth quarter when the game was kind of already decided, and scored some points to get us to 22. Our running backs, who had to fill in obviously for Emmett Johnson, our star player who was not in this game, played pretty well. Mekhi Nelson had 12 carries for 88 yards. Isaiah Mosey had 7 for 32. So, we were able to get some things going on the running game. And I did see some play calls, even in those highlights that showed that, that Dana Holgerson, threw some new things in there. For example, on the play that scored us our second touchdown that brought us to 14 points, we did a nice thing where we had Barney go on a motion, from left to right. And as TJ snapped the ball, he just tossed the ball in front of himself over to Barney, who was already moving at top speed. And Barney just took that ball and ran it right in for a touchdown. That's not a play I've seen us use very much this year.
We used it quite a bit late last season, and we used it early this year. But for whatever reason, it after like the Michigan game, I think Michigan kind of shut it down. And after that, we very rarely saw it again until that play in the bowl game. So
Right.
you're correct. And part of that was because Emmett Johnson was doing so well, running the football that they just wanted to ride that. And also Barney and his backup were both battling injuries all season, right? So the other reason you don't do that is a play that can be a little dangerous for the guy running it, right? Because there are going to be times when that doesn't get blocked well, and that player doesn't get the edge, he doesn't get the corner, and he just gets hammered, right? And so I think they were probably hesitant to do that with Barney being a little questionable from an injury standpoint. He had some leg injuries that he battled all season, or almost of the season. So I think that's part of it. But I still say our running game's lack of creativity, lack of adjustment, is one of the things that drives me most crazy about Dana Holgerson and his offense. His reliance on the short passing game is craziness to me. Because they were just coming all out. I mean, house calls, man, defensively. They would bring 6 guys.
But looking at the stats, right, we actually had 3 sacks on them. Well, they had 3 sacks on us, so we were even on that particular stat. And on that pass play that I mentioned that unfortunately led to the interception, but to get that pass off, TJ actually pulled off a good move where a guy was coming right at him, and he just did a little sidestep to make the guy miss, and then he threw it, which is what you want to see for, him dodging out of pressure. I saw another highlight in that highlight reel where, it was kind of a bit of a broken play, and he scrambled off to his right and got us a first down, got like 12 yards on a nice little run, showing off, his mobility. Now I know that the highlight reel I saw cut out all the garbage that you saw, where we just were doing absolutely nothing on offense, and they didn't they didn't highlight those. So I understand I'm seeing a bit of a rose-tinted glasses here.
Yes, you are.
But also, seeing on a lot of those plays, a lot of the plays where they, got first downs and stuff on us, or got some bigger 15-yard type plays. We're on 3rd and long or 4th downs. It's not like we were completely inept on defense. It felt like we were able to get them into some, awkward yardage situations, but they would find a way to convert those. And it's the same story that we've been talking about all season, where when the quarterback that we're going up against is a running threat, we can't seem to contain him. And that's how they were beating us in a lot of those situations.
Well, so many defenses are designed to work really well if you don't have to account for the quarterback as a runner, because then that allows you to do all kinds of things in coverage and even in terms of blitz packages and such, because that threat is diminished. When you have a runner, then you have to defend all 11 players, and that's just been extremely hard for our defense to do. For whatever reason, that's just been the case. This is with a new defensive coordinator and new coaches at a variety of positions, including Matt Rule, temporarily trying to coach up the defensive line, and they did not play well, in my opinion. Now, again, like you said, there were some individual plays and some individual performance that was good, that was promising, and we're a very young team, so I get all that. But now we're losing some of our best players to the portal. So, we're going to have to wait till the dust settles. We're really not going to know what the real deal is on this until this whole portal thing is done and we get a spring practice in with our new entries, our new additions, rather.
Yep. And then in terms of turnovers, we were down 1-0 on that front. But not like, TJ was making mistakes and throwing picks all over the place. We had 5 penalties to their 4. So, looking at the stats, we played respectably from that perspective. We got 20 some points on them. We could have gotten more, on that drive where we threw the pick. So, I do see some things to take out of it, seeing our running backs get some things going, despite the fact that EJ, was gone and they didn't get a ton of snaps earlier this year. I took some good news away from that, even though in other aspects of the game, it was a real beatdown.
Right. And, it's one of those games that it's a bowl game. We had some players missing. They had some players missing. I think the players probably had a good experience. It's a hell of a venue to be able to play a game in. So I think the attendance was very good. I didn't actually see any data on the actual attendance. I don't know if you might have that, but anyway, overall, I think still a positive experience for the team and for the players and the coaches and their families. It's still a very good thing, but I'm not taking a lot of positives out of it from the standpoint of the direction of the program. And I think we're at a point now where, with a couple of exceptions, our team does not have any we must preserve this player type of players. And so we are free to go and literally revamp the roster. And if any of the players who are currently on our team want to leave as a result of us trying to make ourselves better by going to the portal, then let them do it. Because at some point, this has to start to become a little bit of a two-way street where we can go get players who we think are going to elevate the competition level in the various position rooms.
Right. I just found this tweet from Sean Callahan. It said, today's Las Vegas Bowl drew a crowd of 38,879, the largest since the game moved to Allegiant Stadium.
Okay, gotcha. So it wasn't the largest in history, but the largest since they moved to that stadium. It was a decent crowd. I mean, but it didn't look like full or anything. So
right. Yep. So like you say, now we're kind of in this transfer portal window, and we're recording this on January 5th. So it literally just opened a few days ago. It's going to continue through the 16th. So we'll be coming to you next week with a podcast about, of course, the results of the CFP semifinal games, and we'll give updates on the Nebraska portal situation at that time. But in terms of transfers out of the program. We've heard some news, and we're going to give some highlights of more significant players that are leaving. One is quarterback Marcos Davila, so limiting our quarterback room a little bit more. One of our past kicker, Tristan Alvano. Offensive lineman Keona Davis. Offensive lineman Houston Torres. And also Willis McGahee the fourth.
Right. And Keona Davis is a defensive lineman, and
Okay.
Torres was those are two young players who had a lot of promise. So those hurt because those were players that Torres was a depth piece that was going to start to be a factor for us, I think, and didn't give himself a chance to stick around and find out. Not a complete surprise given the fact that we fired, the Hawaiian native head coach, assistant coach who was his position coach. So I guess I shouldn't be completely surprised by that particular portal. And then Keona Davis is the one that to me really hurts. Right, he's a guy that we have invested quite a bit in. He was probably one of our more highly paid players on the defensive line going into this season because he portaled last year. You might remember, and then we brought him back out of the portal. So he went out there and tried to see what he could get on the open market, and then we were able to convince him, whether it was by money or by playing time opportunity, convinced him to come back, and then now he's done it again. Now he's gone back out. I think this time he's out there to stay. Right, he's not coming back again. But those are the guys that disappoint me. There's another 12 or 14 guys that have left. I think by and large those are all very replaceable players, and for whatever reason they're gone. But now the focus for us really needs to be hot and heavy on getting some talent brought into this program to elevate our talent level and our maturity, right? Guys that have played. That's what we really need.
Yep. Well, and we've heard about 2 transfers into the program that would help on those regards in terms of more experienced players with playing time. One is Iowa State offensive lineman Brendan Black. He is a 3-year starter from Iowa State. And South Dakota State linebacker Owen Chambliss, who is like their leading tackler on their defense.
No, not South Dakota, San Diego State, which is where our defensive coordinator's from.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're right. SDSU. So, those are two solid gets, it seems like, to help give us, like you say, that experience that we might need.
Yes, exactly. And I'm hopeful that those are the kind of players that we continue to go after. Now, the reality is, so is everybody else now. The Indiana formula of performance over potential is absolutely ingrained in everybody's brain right now. So now all of a sudden, any players that have years of experience and actually played and started college football games, their value has gone up considerably in this cycle from previous cycles. Right. And it's less of a factor where you played, as long as you played college football, right? Maybe you question it a little bit if it's not Division I, but it doesn't matter whether. I mean, let's use the guy from the quarterback for Ole Miss, came from Ferris State, Alex, which is right up by where you grew up, right? Ferris State is in Big Rapids, Michigan. And but that was a guy who played, whatever, I don't even know what division that is, Division II or whatever, but he had won 2 national championships at that level, playing for Ferris State. And then he went to Ole Miss and lit it up, right? Similar to the stories of the quarterback at Indiana the previous year, who had played it at your alma mater, Ohio U, right? And then he goes to Indiana, and they have a spectacular season. And now, so it's all about. And here's the other interesting news: is Indiana has already gotten their portal quarterback for next year. Again, they went to the portal, and they went and grabbed a guy who was a 3-year starter for TCU, and threw for 3,000 plus yards this year. So
Right.
now he wasn't the big name guy because he wasn't a 5-star coming out of high school, I don't think. But he had proved to be effective. TCU hasn't necessarily been great over these last 2 or 3 years. They had actually dropped down a little, but he's got all that experience and he's got some physical tools that he's been able to put on tape, right?
Yep.
And that made Indiana want him.
And is Mendoza, their current quarterback, is he leaving? Is he a junior or senior?
Well, I think the fact that they got that TCU guy tells me that he hasn't announced yet, obviously, because they're still in the playoff, and I don't think he wants to muddy those waters. But I think it's a pretty strong indication that he's going to be leaving.
Yeah, I suppose that would make sense.
Of course, he could change his mind. I mean, because now that he looks at the price tag that the Texas Tech just paid for Sorsby, who had 69 yards passing against us, Alex. 69 yards, total yards. Okay.
Right.
And that guy got $5 million for a year at Texas Tech.
Right. And then that's the Cincinnati quarterback, right?
Right. He was, and he's a good player. Is he $5 million worth of player for a college player? Are you kidding me?
Right. Okay. Yeah. And Fernando Mendoza is a junior. Yeah. So yeah, he's definitely going to go to the NFL after the year he's had at Indiana.
You would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other big transfer news that, we would be getting excited about and talking about has literally flipped around on us here in the past couple hours as of us recording here on the 5th. But we heard that Notre Dame backup quarterback Kenny Minchey was going to be transferring to Nebraska. It was sounding like it was a done deal. It
was announced on ESPN.
Right. He was competing for the starting job at Notre Dame before the season. It sounds like it was a close-fought thing, but he didn't win it. So he played in a few games, this year for Notre Dame, but not a ton. But he was the number 5 ranked dual threat quarterback in the 2023 class. 6 feet tall. So a guy who, similar to TJ, right, a dual threat guy, so that's kind of what we're looking for. A redshirt sophomore, so someone with still some years of eligibility left. So it seemed like a pretty good get for Nebraska. But now it's just come out here today that apparently Kentucky came to him with a blank check, and even though he was supposed to sign with Nebraska on the 6th tomorrow, he has now switched his commitment to Kentucky and will no longer be coming to Nebraska. That's the current news.
Correct. And this is the new reality. This is a kid who had, gone through all the processes. We had given him an offer that he accepted. His agent was he had the papers, was ready to sign him. And the kid didn't sign him because he got a last minute outreach from the University of Kentucky. And Kentucky obviously offered him something that sounded better to him. I suspect it had something to do with money. Maybe another, I don't know, whatever. And so he's now going. So this kid just used us to leverage to get a bigger number at the end of the day, and it worked. So,
right.
And again, these guys are all getting. I mean, we were going to pay him. In all likelihood, we from what I can gather, we were somewhere in the range of a $1.5 million for this guy, and so he has to be getting paid more than that to go to Kentucky. In all likelihood.
Well, like you said, if Texas Tech is offering $5 million to the Cincinnati quarterback, then this guy's like, well, maybe I won't get $5 million, but maybe I can get 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Now the difference is this kid, although he comes with many accolades out of high school, really he has like 30 or 40 pass attempts last year. During a year when Notre Dame was good. Notre Dame was whatever they were, 10-2 or whatever. He only got 30 pass attempts in a season in which, you would think if he was good, they would have been getting him in the game in some of these blowouts. I mean, they blew out Stanford, they blew out Pitt, they blew out Navy. I mean, they had a lot of dominant wins, right? So why didn't he throw the ball more? So not to be second guessing, but you understand my point.
Right. And you mentioned to me before the podcast that if we Well, look, on the bright side of this turnaround for Nebraska, he is more of a potential versus performance kind of quarterback, right? Because we haven't seen him on the field that much. So maybe, in the long run, we'll get a quarterback from the portal who maybe is from a lower level, but does have a lot of playing time, and that will be more valuable in the end.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, we'll see how the chips fall and see where they go. But we're going to keep trying. That I do know.
But with the departure of Davila, which we mentioned earlier, that does leave our quarterback room now very thin. So based on our speculation, what we were talking about from our previous podcast, now we need to go out and get 2 transfer quarterbacks where we need, one guy who is, could potentially start, right? Might kind of jump over TJ, or at least very much compete with him for the job. And then maybe one who's more of a backup guy, who's willing to, get the good NIL money from Nebraska and develop kind of behind our other 2 guys. But yeah, it's kind of left us in a bit of a lurch here.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is there's been plenty of seasons in my lifetime of following Nebraska football where we have absolutely needed a 4th quarterback. We've had a quarter of a game. We've won national championships on years when our 3rd string quarterback had to start and then got injured, and we had to play a 4th team quarterback for, in a top 10 matchup to get us through that game. So
right.
This idea that you don't need at least 3 or 4 quarterbacks that are good enough that they could step in, even if it's just for a quarter, and get you through a game, that's a requirement. And now we're thin. So we're going to have to get 2, no doubt.
Yep. And then in terms of general Nebraska sports, we wanted to highlight the basketball program again. I know we talked about them a few weeks ago when they got a big win. When they just got another one over 9th-ranked Michigan State, beat them 58-56 in a close run affair. The players stormed the court after the win. It was at Nebraska. Now, just here today, they played against Ohio State and beat them away at Ohio State. So Nebraska is off to a 15-0 start in basketball. Potentially might get ranked in the top 10 here pretty soon, which is historically good for our basketball program, which is not known for its success.
Well, they are actually ranked 10th.
There you go.
The rankings just came out, and so they are ranked 10th. So we are a top 10 basketball team, at least as of tonight. And we just beat Ohio State, which keeps us in that mix. Now we do need to go, and we have to go play another away game here in a few days at Oregon, and that won't be an easy victory at all. But boy, it sure would be nice if we could find a way to win that one, because then I think we go next week on another road trip to Michigan to play the number 1 ranked Michigan team, or number 2 or whatever they are. But they're killing everybody that's in their way. So crazy.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on them, as we do our final few football podcasts here as we get to the end of the football season. But hey, if they're really could keep up this excellence, maybe we'll have to come do some March Madness podcasts, when we get to that point in time.
There you go. That sounds good.
You'd like that. And then in terms of national news, we speculated this on our previous podcast, but it was since then confirmed that Kyle Whittingham, the Utah head coach, would be going to Michigan, which you had speculated about on the last podcast we did, and saying that would actually be a great move for Michigan, after kind of whiffing on some of these other people they went after. Getting Kyle Whittingham in as kind of a in-between coach. I believe he has a 5-year contract per what's been agreed, so he's kind of going to be there to stabilize things, be a great moral guy, after the rough times they've gone through here recently, kind of get them back on track, and then maybe give the new athletic director, who may be coming in later on, the opportunity to hire a younger guy to kind of be the more permanent long-term solution a few years down the line.
Yeah, well, and he did such a great job already of surrounding himself with outstanding assistants that I think that there's a chance that if he can have success there at Michigan, that they might transition right into one of his assistants taking his place. And keep in mind that this is a 66-year-old that looks like he's 55, okay, and
Right.
is healthy as a in great physical condition. So I have a feeling he has the energy and the wherewithal to continue with that program even beyond the 5 years that he signed for if he wants to. And I just have a feeling I think it's a great fit. They almost couldn't have gotten a better solution given the horrible negative media situation that was surrounding them and the fact that they were getting into the market very very late in the coaching cycle. I think this is nothing short of a home run hire for Michigan.
Yes, agreed. And so now we're going to fully transition here into the national conversation. We're going to talk about the major bowl games. We predicted quite a few of them on episode 217. So we're going to go through our predictions there and how those games actually played out. Talk about a couple other ones that turned out to be exciting games. And then lastly, we'll kind of get into the playoff situation to kind of wrap up the podcast. So first one I've got on my list here was the Alamo Bowl, which was USC versus TCU. Both of us went the Big Ten's way, saying that USC would win. I said 42-28, while you said USC would win 38-17. So even bigger score. But that game kind of surprised both of us, where TCU won that one in overtime, 30-27 over USC.
Yeah, well, but USC had a 10-point lead in that game with like 5 minutes to go.
With 10 minutes left.
10 minutes to go. Okay. Then and they just let it slip away.
Yes.
Very, very disappointed.
Right. Well, yeah. So, yeah, they were up 24-14 with 10 minutes left in the game. And USC nearly got a play that would have sealed the game for them, where it looked like they got a pick six, but it was called a incomplete pass, where the when the ball came out of the quarterback's hand, it was moving forward. So they called it an incomplete pass rather than a fumble. Which, if that had gone USC's way, obviously that would have been huge. But yeah, they had they were down 2-1 on the turnover margin, and one of their turnovers, USC's turnovers, was in the end zone, basically as they were about to score. And then in overtime, USC got a field goal and had TCU at 3rd and 20 and gave up a touchdown run, where their guy, admittedly, it was an amazing run, where he scampered along the sideline and just barely stayed in bounds and got a touchdown to win the game for him.
So, that was a disappointing game, one that I genuinely thought USC was the better team and should have won. I was kind of expecting or counting that as a potential victory for the Big Ten. But then there were some other matchups that I thought the Big Ten would lose, but the Big Ten won. So I think collectively as a conference, our team is still done. I mean, our conference has still done well in bowl games.
Yes, well, I know I'll talk about that near the end, because I've got those score records to talk about.
Okay.
But what do you think about, I was just thinking about the Lincoln Riley situation, because talk about a coach that they got, that had all this acclaim coming from Oklahoma and everything. And, now we're several years into the experiment with him, and he's, not done terribly, but certainly not achieved the level of success that USC was hoping for and that they're paying top dollar for.
My opinion is he's fine, and here's the reason why. You are right that the performance in terms of win-loss record on the field has been below standard, below expectation, and they're disappointed in that. However, there have been some extenuating circumstances. The transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten was not easy for any of those programs, the travel issues that they've dealt with, et cetera. They had just a massive amount of injuries last year, and now this year, they beat Michigan. They beat us. We threw everything but the kitchen sink at them, and they still beat us. right? We had the most, electric environment we could possibly create. They went into a hornet's nest in Lincoln, and they still found a way to beat us. And they through massive he didn't have a great NIL organization initially at USC, but somehow he's gotten that together, and they went out and purchased themselves the number one recruiting class in the country, and it's not even close. I mean, they have a star-studded freshman, or incoming high school senior, type recruiting class off the charts, and that team is going to be the nucleus of what will likely be a very strong and powerful USC team for years to come. So I think he has weathered the storm, so to speak, and I think the trajectory and optimism at USC is quite high right now.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. All right. The next one I've got on our list here is the venerable Pop-Tart Bowl, which was BYU versus Georgia Tech. We both predicted BYU would win. I said it'd be 35-21, while you went with a closer score of 24-17. And the final score of that one was pretty close. But BYU did win that one 25-21 over Georgia Tech. So you were a little closer on the margin on that one. And yeah, that one ended up being a pretty competitive game, even though BYU was actually down 21-10.
Yes.
But they shut out Georgia Tech in the second half and managed to make a comeback.
Right. They just kept playing, right? Kept grinding, which is kind of classically their head coach's MO there at BYU. So credit to him that his players didn't give up and they kept trying. And see, that's where I look at Nebraska, and I'm disappointed in what I saw from the coaching staff at Nebraska during our game, because I felt like we didn't adjust. We didn't attempt to do some other things. If the short passing game and and all of a sudden the runs that were working in the first couple of series aren't working, then you do something different. You start running some counters. You start doing some rollouts and some counter action throws. You start going under center with a fullback. You try some other offense to complement and force them out of the defensive alignment that's working so well against you. You don't keep doing the same damn things. And that's what I feel like we did. So I give BYU a lot of credit, because I feel like they did continue to try different things through that game and ultimately found some stuff that worked. And, had the game continued to go, they might very well have won.
Right. Then in terms of the Pinstripe Bowl, that was Penn State versus Clemson. And I believe the bookies, at least at the time that we did that podcast, had Clemson as the favorite. And we both said, oh, that's a good one for the bettors out there to go Penn State's way, because Penn State had improved, their play over the course of their season. So we both went Penn State's way. I said it'd be 28-24. You thought it'd be bigger spread of 28-14. And the final score of that one ended up being 22-10. So you were right. It was kind of a bigger spread going Penn State's way. And another solid win for the Big Ten there.
Yes.
Admittedly, it was looking like kind of an ugly game. I want to say it was like 6-10 or 6-3 or something like that for a lot of the game. But then Penn State scored 16 points in the fourth quarter, so they kind of sealed it at the end for themselves.
I think it was 6-3 at halftime, if I remember correctly. It was really ugly.
Yeah. So, hey, they pulled it out, though. That's what matters for them. Hopefully they find something good for that guy who's been their interim head coach. I know obviously he's not staying on to be the main head coach going forward, but he seems to have done a pretty good job there.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then next one we predicted was Michigan versus Texas in the Citrus Bowl. We both went Texas's way. I said that Texas would win 30-17, while you said Texas would win 28-21. And the final score for that one ended up being 41-27. But frankly, that score does not tell you how close that game really was. Michigan was actually up in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree. And they were hanging in there, right? Like they they absolutely made it a game. Now the final score is a little bit more lopsided than you would expect, but and this game was going on at the same time as the Nebraska game, so I just on occasion flipped back and forth. But again, what I would admire about Michigan was they hung in there, right? They kept fighting, and again, I believe that I see examples of more adjustment. We have to be able to have a coaching staff that when things aren't going our way, we can still find a way to both motivate our team to play hard and not give up and and execute, right? Even when you're getting physically beaten, and then you have to be creative enough to come up with other ways to score, other ways to stop people on defense. And it just did not seem like we tried to do that. We just kind of let them keep doing what they were doing.
Yeah, so Michigan rather, did score and actually were up 27-24, like I mentioned in the fourth
Yep.
quarter. But then I think Texas came out and scored, and then Michigan, I believe, had 2 turnovers in that fourth quarter, so they ended up being -3 on the turnover margin overall. One of those turnovers being in the red zone. It was in Michigan's own red zone, meaning that they gave Texas great field position to score, which is, I think, how the score ballooned to that 41 points near the end of the game.
Right. And that's the thing. You just don't win a game when you're turning the ball over like that. You just don't.
Yeah. And then also there was the ReliaQuest Bowl, which was Iowa versus Vanderbilt. I said that Vanderbilt would win it 33-21, while you went Iowa's way, saying they would win 24-17 over Vanderbilt. And this is one where you got the best of me. Iowa did end up winning that one 34-27, kind of mucking up the football game as they always do.
Yep.
In fact, they both teams had some pretty big mistakes. Iowa had threw an interception in the red zone when they were about to score, but then Vanderbilt very stupidly had a illegal punt where their punter went beyond the line of scrimmage, which then basically gave Iowa the ball at around the area where he punted, which was very near their own end zone, and so that gave Iowa an easy score. So they kind of traded some points there.
And I've never seen that play before.
Right.
Like I've never seen that called, right? Like I've never seen that. And I guess it probably happens with more regularity now that so many people are part of this Australian running and punting thing. But yeah, that was a brutal thing when he went over that line of scrimmage. So
yeah,
that was a big point in the game.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. And of course, Iowa's defense was showing off what they could do, and we're getting sacks on Diego Pavia quite a bit throughout that game.
Right. Yeah. Now, Pavia played really poorly early, but then he rose to the occasion and started playing a lot better in the latter part of the game, and was fighting to bring them back. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and now, so that ends the ones that we gave official predictions for, but obviously there were some other ones that ended up being kind of interesting. In the Gator Bowl, Virginia beat Missouri 13-7.
I watched that one, and that was absolutely deserving Virginia victory. Like I think again, going into it, I think the SEC team was expected to win, but Virginia earned that victory.
And then Houston versus LSU, 38-35.
Oh, same thing there. Now that was a score fest, right? Like that was just pinball type of stuff, and Houston just kept hanging in there. You kept thinking that, well, okay, now LSU's talent's going to kind of finally step away and create separation, but they didn't. I probably turned away from that game a couple of times thinking it was over, that the momentum had gone to LSU and it was just going to, kind of be finished up. And then I would see another score and go back and watch it again, so, but love to see those two SEC schools lose.
Yeah. Talk about a score fest. Then North Texas played against San Diego
Yeah.
State University in the New Mexico Bowl and won 49-47.
San Diego State was a little bit gutted. They had lost their defensive coordinator to us. They had lost a couple of their players who had already portaled out and or made themselves available for the draft or whatever to prepare for the chance to be drafted. And so their defense couldn't stop a paper bag. Oh,
Right. And this one was quite an upset in the Holiday Bowl. Number 17 Arizona lost to SMU 24-19.
now I didn't watch that game for whatever reason, so I don't have a lot of comment on that. Now, why would you say that SMU was the underdog, a significant underdog in that?
Well, Arizona's ranked 17th and SMU is not ranked in the top 25. So that's
Okay,
more
all
where
right,
I'm
all
at.
right. SMU is one of those schools that has a big NIL machine
Right.
and has been gifting out money right and left in its sports programs, and so I have a feeling that they had more talent than maybe people realized. Maybe it didn't gel, as well as it should have, but the talent was definitely there. So
Right. And then this one was quite surprising to me in the Music City Bowl. Illinois beat Tennessee 30-28, a Big Ten versus SEC matchup. Now, Tennessee had a 39-yard field goal that they missed earlier in the game, which they obviously regretted later on. And both teams kind of gave up some easy scores. Illinois got a scoop and score off of a fumble by Tennessee, but then Illinois gave up a kickoff return touchdown with 5 minutes left in the game to kind of give Tennessee a way back into it. But
right,
Illinois drove it down and won on a game-winning field goal to end it off.
right. That was an impressive victory by Illinois for sure.
Yeah. And I saw this stat I thought was worth pointing out to kind of point out the hollowness of some of these SEC teams. Tennessee didn't beat a single FBS team with a winning record this season.
Right, exactly. Well, and there's some other teams from the SEC that have some strange little details like that too. So,
Right.
And it's because they all play those four nobodies. So it'll be very interesting to see when they start to play a tougher schedule.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just go ahead and say it now. Obviously, this factors in the playoff matchups, which we haven't discussed yet, but the current rankings of the conferences in terms of bowl wins and losses is Big Ten at the top at 9-4, ACC right below them at 8-4, the Big 12 at 4-4, kind of an even spread, and then the SEC with a disappointing 4-9. So this is now the second season in the row where the SEC has kind of had a disappointing postseason record going up against the other conferences.
And this on the heels of a bunch of them being ranked, right? And the fact that they got 5 teams into the 12-team playoff mechanism, right? Based on these teams were ranked in the top 12 or whatever, and now we understand for again the second year in a row that the hype machine that is ESPN ends up influencing that committee and influencing those rankings, okay, in such a way that we end up with less deserving teams getting into that top 12 because the humans involved cannot separate the BS from reality. And that's been what I say, right? A continuous ringing talking point of mine on this podcast. And here it is another year. Proof is in the pudding.
Well, and to add insult to injury for the SEC there, and in a fashion that made I know both of us very happy, Alabama, the team that got into the playoff through the good graces of the playoff committee and ESPN, got absolutely drummed by Indiana in the Rose Bowl. I predicted that Indiana would win that game. I thought it'd be 35-17. You actually went Alabama's way, not wanting them to win, but predicting that they would win through some shenanigans in a close 28-24 affair. But the final score of that one ended up being a 38-3. Brutal loss. I think it's the first time Alabama's lost by more than 30 points in, decades. Really impressive by Cignetti. They were up 17-0 at halftime, and they were able to capitalize on Alabama's aggression, where I think Alabama kind of went for it on fourth down around midfield and then didn't get it, which then left Indiana with good field position to then score themselves.
That is correct. That did happen. And I could never be happier that I was wrong in a non-Nebraska related way. This was fabulous. Such a joy to watch. Really, really fun to watch this Indiana team that plays with such abandon and yet such discipline, right? They just play with this supreme confidence and attitude, and yet they don't make mistakes very often, and they play hard. And, I'm sorry, those two rosters, even though, Indiana's doing great, those two rosters are not similar, except at the quarterback position. Clearly, Indiana's got the advantage of quarterback. But otherwise, none of those kids would have even made the out of high school would have made the Alabama roster, right? And they wouldn't have been recruited by him. And yet they had guys, even backup guys, who came in at receiver and just played absolutely crazy good. And I was concerned, as you'll remember, because Indiana lost one of their best defensive linemen for the rest of the season in the conference championship game. They didn't miss a beat, man. That defensive line was still fabulous. So much for my concern about that.
Yeah. It should be mentioned that Alabama did fumble the ball, which gave Indiana another score. And their quarterback, Ty Robinson, was kind of banged up near the end of the first half and did not come out to start the second half. So obviously that played into, or Ty Simpson, rather, that's his name. That played into some of their struggles. But yeah, I saw that apparently the ratings for the Rose Bowl were also high. It was like 24 million. So even though it was not a close game from an entertainment perspective, I think plenty of people across the country were willing to tune in to watch Alabama get beat down by this upstart Indiana team.
Yeah. So, okay. Before we move on to any other games, this is a microcosm of what I talk about all the time, Alex. Paul Feinbaum, the idiot, gumbo, big-eared loser who works for ESPN and is an absolute SEC shill. You know what? Even in light of that data, that data point you just said about the tremendous NFL-like viewership numbers of that game, he writes an article and spends a bunch of time in his radio show talking about how Ole Miss is America's team in this playoff. Ole Miss. Okay. Yeah. You're an idiot. Okay. Everybody is on the Indian. If you're not a football fan of the other three teams that are left in this, you are an Indiana fan. Just because of the story. They're going to make a movie about this season for Indiana, and it might be better than Hoosiers.
Right. Well, I get what he's saying from the perspective of Indiana's been near the top of the, in the top 5 ranked teams, all season. And they're currently the number 1 ranked team. So from that perspective, they're kind of expected to win. Whereas if Ole Miss or Miami, or Oregon, less so Oregon, but if the other two, came out and won, that would be a bit more of an upset, bit more of a surprise, for those who are following the sport more closely. But in terms of the national conversation, right, if you're just more of a casual fan, I think the Indiana thing has much more momentum behind it. I don't know if you've seen it. There's this clip from
huge
from the sidelines of Curt Cignetti. Even though he's winning the game, he's like staring really intently with his brows furrowed, at his players from the sideline. And I've seen all these memes online of like people saying, this is what I look like when I'm barbecuing meat or things like that, so it's got to take it on a life of its own, right?
Right. He's a big believer in the process. What's going on. The score takes care of itself. I mean, that goes back to a very, very fundamental Tom Osborne philosophy, which I wish our current coaches understood better. It's not about having the kids want to win. They're want to win, or there's a difference between competitiveness and wanting to win. And I want somebody who is a competitor and who understands that he needs to trust his training and the power of the process. And the winning will take care of itself.
Right. And last thing I want to mention, just because I think it was a great thing, is that the MVP for the Rose Bowl game was Indiana's center. And I love it in the camera shot. The camera was over on like the quarterback and all these other players. And then it pans over to the center, when he wins, and all the other Indiana guys are yelling and cheering, and go over and hug the center guy because he played amazing in that game, holding down the fort, for their Mendoza and everything. So I think that's just another sign of, something special they've got going there at Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I just think the whole Paul Feinbaum thing is literally in a bottle. What's wrong with the SEC ESPN relationship and the undue influence that they have?
Okay. Next up, we'll talk about the Oregon versus Texas Tech game, which is number 5 versus number 4. I went ahead and said that Oregon would win that one 31-28 in a close affair. And you also thought it'd be close, but you went Texas Tech's way, 24-21. And now that one ended up being 23-0 over Oregon over Texas Tech. So not quite the way you thought, but once again, when I went and watched the highlights of that game, it was closer than the score would make you think.
No, I disagree. And I watched it. I'm telling you, Alex, Oregon blew 2 or 3 early opportunities in that game that should have led to touchdowns. I mean, I was expressing concern for Oregon at halftime, even, that, hey, you know what? You guys should be up by so much more than you are. Okay. Now, to Oregon's credit, they were grinding and grinding. They had a really good success with their field goal kicker and stuff, who kept getting them at least 3. But they definitely missed out on an inordinate number of scoring opportunities, and that final score should have been even more lopsided from the standpoint of scoring opportunities early that Oregon botched. Okay. Now, I will agree with you. I would agree with you, though, that from the standpoint that Texas Tech never gave up, Texas Tech continued to work and strive, but they would just make a mistake at the worst times. I mean, what was it? 5 turnovers, or was it 6?
4-1 on turnovers.
4-1. Okay.
Like you say, if you're down by 3 on the turnover margin, it's hard to win any game. But it was only 6-0 at halftime, even though Texas Tech had turned the ball over twice in that half, and I believe Oregon had one near goal line stop. So Texas Tech's vaunted defense that they paid so much money for, I think, showed off why they're there and gave Oregon some trouble. But when you're turning the ball over that many times, I want to say Texas Tech had a fumble on the 5-yard line later in the game. So Texas Tech just did not play very well.
No, they didn't. They didn't play well enough to win it. They did not play well enough to win. But here's the thing that's good news for Oregon, if you will, is they didn't play that well either, and yet they still pitched a shutout.
And the other thing is that Oregon scored their last touchdown with 20 seconds left in the game, so it was whatever that'd be, 16-0, right? And they could have, the game was over. They could have kind of left it at that, but they kind of chose to score the extra points.
Right.
There.
Well, I think they were trying to build momentum for this next game, right? Like they're trying to get their offense to get off the schneid and stop shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. Next game we'll talk about here is another one that was a bit surprising for me, was Miami versus Ohio State. We both predicted that Ohio State would win that one. I said they would win 24-10 over Miami. You said it'd be 34-17. At the time that we recorded, Ohio State were 10-point favorites, so Vegas also was on our side on that one. And yet Miami won that game 24-14 over number 2 ranked Ohio State, the defending national champions.
Yep. I tell you, Miami played well in that game, but I would say equally, Ohio State played poorly, right? Like it really was a situation where Ohio State did not deal with adversity well, and they just did not play a very good football game. They were the team that I think exhibited, this phenomenon that we've now generally observed, that the teams that got the bye struggled to play clean football, right? You think about Texas Tech. You think about Ohio State, right? And the only one that's the exception, Indiana.
Right.
So out of the what now, eight games that have been played with this bye week, the team that got the bye, better team, if you will, 1-7.
Right. Yep. No, that's definitely that's going to be a talking point, which I think lends credence to what we've discussed on previous podcasts about expanding the playoff to 16 teams. And so then those top ranked teams do still play a game, but they play a game against significantly inferior competition. And you get to, kind of warm up with that. And that is maybe more beneficial than the buys that they have been getting.
Absolutely. And it would be on their home campus. So you're rewarding that fan base, right, with those home games. Because I tell you what, anybody who watched those previous week games, Oregon's victory and Miami's victory. I mean, well, I'm not. Miami might be a bad example, but Oregon's for sure. I mean, the crowd was incredible, right? That the environment for that game, the Texas A&M Miami game, was an incredible environment. Miami ended up winning it, but it was a great college football environment, right? So,
right.
I just think that's where the benefit should go.
Right, though it was the same, right? Oklahoma had a great environment, and yet Alabama still beat them, right?
True. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and also talk about that Miami game. Miami was up 14-0 at halftime, and that was because of a crucial pick six, right? That pick six that Ohio State threw was the most important play in the game. Because Miami's offense was struggling, right? Like they didn't necessarily score a lot of points. I think they ended up scoring a touchdown late, to kind of get to their those 24 points that they ended up having. But they didn't have that big of a lead for the majority of the game. But Miami's defense played great and was sacking Ohio State a lot.
Yep. And Ohio State just couldn't do anything, right? They just had no answer.
Yep.
With all those wide receiver talent, all those great running backs, much like my criticism of Nebraska's coordinator on offense, I feel like Ohio State's offensive coordinator, it's like you got to have more creativity on your running game.
Right.
When the running plays you're running aren't working, there's got to be some counteractions. There's got to be some alternatives to those plays where if that defense is rushing and closing that so fast, then there ought to be an opposite play that you can run that would be able to make them pay for that, right? That is a fact. And Ohio State never did that.
And then the last one we'll talk about here was the Sugar Bowl, which was Georgia versus Ole Miss. Once again, you and I agreed. We thought Georgia would win that one. I said it'd be 31-24. You said 41-31. Georgia over Ole Miss. And that game ended up being the most exciting in terms of it being a close game of all these quarterfinal, I guess you would say, matchups. But that ended up going Ole Miss's way, 39-34, and quite a shootout, back and forth affair.
So I was right that it was going to be a shootout or higher scoring. It was wrong that I thought eventually Georgia would be the one that would break Ole Miss down and end up winning.
Right.
I'm still a little surprised that Georgia didn't win that game. When they tied it late, I thought, okay, Georgia's going to win this thing.
Right. Well, I tell you what, I've not followed Ole Miss that much throughout the season, but they've got a hell of a weapon in their field goal kicker. He made a 55-yard field goal and a 56-yard field goal, and he made it look easy. Like he could have been
Yes.
60, 65 yards, and he would have made it, it seemed like.
I agree. Yeah, that was impressive.
And they kind of failed to utilize it properly because at the very end of the half, they were in field goal yardage position, but they just barely didn't get a first down, and they had a massive communication problem where they had no timeouts and their offense was still out there and the field goal unit was coming out, and basically they got nothing out of the end of the half. Time just expired. So that's 3 potential points that they kind of left off the board there.
Yes, exactly. Well, and then that's just them being aggressive, right?
Yeah. Whereas Georgia missed a 55-yard field goal, and then this was a bizarre one for me watching the highlights of the game. It was pretty late. It was 9 minutes, 40 seconds left to go in the game. Georgia is on their own 33-yard line on 4th and 2, and they go for it and they don't get it. And to me, when you're still competitive in the game and there's still that much time left on the clock, 9 minutes 40 seconds, you just punt the ball there. You don't take that huge risk because they didn't get it, and that left Ole Miss in great field position. I thought that was a crazy decision by Kirby Smart.
I totally agree. You're exactly right.
Yes. It should be noted that Ole Miss, in some ways, the game kind of became closer than it should have been because on one of Ole Miss's last drives, the Georgia player blatantly face masked Ole Miss's runner, and the refs didn't call it. They totally missed it, even though it was obvious to everybody. And then Georgia got the ball back there, had a nice drive down the field where they could have potentially scored, but Ole Miss stiffened up in the red zone, forced Georgia to settle for a field goal. They settled for a field goal with 1 minute left in the game, and Ole Miss appropriately kicked a 47-yard field goal to kind of win the game, then got a technical safety on the very last play of the game because the ball, was
hit the pylon,
lateraled into the pylon. Yeah. So those 2 points, were added on. I don't really count those. But yeah, right. Once again, kind of a surprise, right? For Ole Miss to beat, the SEC champion Georgia in this kind of shootout affair. Ole Miss's, offense showing off what they could do against a very good Georgia defense.
Well, and that the whole end of that game became bizarre because of that. They ended up putting a second back on the clock or something. I don't remember exactly the details of that, because they had to they had to punt. They got the 2. I don't know. It was weird, and it took the refs forever to figure out the end of that game.
Well, because Ole Miss kicked the ball off because there were still a few seconds left on the clock, and Georgia chose, rather than taking the knee there, to preserve time, they chose to run it out and do their weird lateral thing. And then the lateral went out of bounds and was near the pylon. And then I think the refs were working out, was that a technical safety or not? And that took some time.
Yeah.
So now that sets up our semifinal matchups, which, like you say, only Indiana is left of those, top 4 seeded teams.
Yep.
So now we have a rematch of Indiana versus Oregon in the Peach Bowl. So a rematch of their earlier game from the Big Ten season. And then in the Fiesta Bowl, we have Miami versus Ole Miss. The Miami team that just barely made it into the playoff right over Notre Dame. That was kind of the talking point at the start of this whole thing. Now they are. They've made it into the top 4.
Well, and if they were going to choose an opponent, at this stage, Ole Miss is the one they would have chosen, right? As opposed to Georgia, right? Or some of those others, even Texas A&M, they would have probably viewed them. So I'm sure that Miami is looking at this and just realizing we have an enormous opportunity here.
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting game because what I've seen so far from Miami is that they've got some offensive struggles, but their defense is legit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they held Texas A&M to 3 points and Ohio State to 14 points. And you're looking at the ACC, right? That record I mentioned of them in the bowl games. They're 8-4.
Right.
Against these SEC and Big Ten and Big 12 teams and things like that. So that shows the ACC is maybe a bit of a stronger conference than people gave it credit for. So yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty interesting matchup.
I agree. I totally agree. And I, as I think about who do I think is going to win. Now, the only thing I would say is that game is held out here in Phoenix.
Right.
That's going to be the Fiesta Bowl, or yeah. But anyway, um, and for whatever reason, Miami has not played well out here. And part of that is their fan base doesn't tend to travel, and they didn't even for the last week. Whoever was in the Orange Bowl, was that Miami and Ohio State?
No, that was Oregon, Texas Tech.
Man, that stadium was like empty. It was sad, and so I wonder about what kind of an attendance the Miami side is going to bring to this game. Now, Ole Miss will probably bring a pretty substantial commitment, but even they are not necessarily super well known as this massive fan base. So maybe it won't be as big a deal as you might otherwise think. But for whatever reason, there's some history of Miami not playing well out here in the Valley of the Sun.
Okay, interesting. So are you taking Ole Miss then?
I am. I'm going to take Ole Miss, but I agree with you. My coaching instinct says I should take Miami because of that defense. But I'm going to go with Ole Miss. But I'm going to say again, I think Miami's defense is going to really cause some problems for Ole Miss. But Ole Miss has got enough talent on offense to find ways to be successful. And I don't think Miami's offense is all that prolific. So Miami's defense is going to have to score some points. If Miami wins this game, it's going to be because their defense, either sets the offense up for some easy scores or just flat out scores themselves. Otherwise, I think Ole Miss has got enough offense to get it done. But let's say 28-17.
All right. Well, to shake things up, I'm going to go ahead and say that Miami wins, and that is exactly as you say, that Miami's defense does score some points for them, and so it is going to be a lower scoring affair. So I'm going to go ahead and say Miami wins. Let's say it's going to have to be lower scoring. So it'll be something like 20 Miami to Ole Miss 13. And then we have the rematch that we mentioned, Indiana versus Oregon. Indiana did beat Oregon previously, but it was not, by a massive amount. And I always kind of give, some, like we saw with the Alabama Oklahoma rematch, right? I always kind of give some extra points to the team that lost previously because they kind of have more to improve on, and they maybe have some more motivation to try to, get their revenge. But on the other hand, Indiana does kind of seem like the team of destiny right now. So I think I'm going to go Indiana's way for this one. What about you?
I think I'm going to go Indiana as well. I am now on the train. I mean, they were just so impressive, and the fact that even with their long layoff, they were so crisp, and those receivers are so good at catching the football, and just all the little details.
And I meant to mention this before, but the fact that Mendoza didn't suffer from the Heisman curse, right? He played very well.
Right. He did. You're exactly right. So I just, now, the argument for Oregon is, okay, Oregon's been in this playoff a few times now. So as a program from, coaching, administration, and even players, they know what it's like. to be around this, right? So this is not going to be new stuff for them. But arguably Indiana was too, right? Because Indiana made it last year as well, and so I, uh, just don't think that's enough. I think Indiana's just a better team, and now that because when Indiana played Oregon, it was at Oregon early in the year, was it not?
Yes, I just looked it up. It was at Oregon, and they won 30-20.
Yeah, and now they're going to be playing over here on the East Coast somewhere, like in Georgia or something, in the Sugar Bowl, or not Sugar Bowl, but Peach Bowl. I think that favors Indiana in terms of attendance and just comfort and playing in the Eastern time zone and all that, where Oregon's going to have to come all the way across the country. I think all that stuff adds up to a Indiana victory. Did you pick a score for that?
No, but I'm gonna say that, I think Oregon's defense, right, they showed off what they could do against Texas Tech. The fact that they held them to no points was definitely impressive. So I'm going to say it might be a little bit lower scoring than people are expecting, but that Indiana will win it. So let's say it's going to be something like 24 Indiana to 17 Oregon.
Okay. I'm going to say I agree with you that the margin is going to be 7 to 10 points, but so I'm going to go very similar to last time. You said it was 30-20 last time. I'm going to say it's going to be 28-17.
Okay, we're pretty similar on that front then. Well, and I have our count here. For all of our predictions for the whole postseason. We've been keeping track so far. So currently, I'm up 9-7 because primarily because for the previous round, right, of the second round of the college football playoff, all four of your picks were wrong. So that's giving me the edge here, but we went opposite ways on Miami, Ole Miss. So you got to be hoping that Ole Miss wins, and that gives you a bit of a lead going into our national championship prediction.
There we go. Okay. That's funny. I was 0 for 4. I'm a genius, by golly.
And that's why we don't bet, folks.
Exactly.
Well, we got some good games out of this round of the playoff right after a first round that, didn't have as many eventful games. I think we got some good ones here. Once again, the Indiana one was not close from a competitive perspective, but from a national interest perspective, obviously it worked, and the Ole Miss game was a classic. So we'll have to see what ends up happening here. It's looking like we're basically guaranteed now to get one Big Ten team in, and then either the ACC or the SEC in on the other side.
Right. And I picked Ole Miss, even though that means the SEC team gets to the finals, which I hate the idea of. So that should have been enough to motivate me to choose Miami. But I don't like Miami so much that I wouldn't want them in either. So the whole preference thing kind of goes out the window.
Right. So basically, you're hoping whoever wins on the other opposite side, the Big Ten side, wins the national championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we've got those games coming up here on Thursday and Friday. So I was thinking about that in terms of Ole Miss, because Miami played earlier than Ole Miss, and Ole Miss played the second day. So I think Ole Miss has a bit 1 day less turnaround for their game than Miami does.
Sure.
Not that 1 day makes a huge difference, but we'll see.
Well, and I find it a little odd that they're doing that on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
That's to avoid the
NFL
going head to head with the NFL, because the NFL is basically dominating now on Saturdays as well this time of year, because we didn't historically have college football at this time, right?
Yes.
So that's probably why they did that.
Right. Which might lean into some of the arguments I've been seeing about how we should play more of these playoff games in December. and not
Yes,
let it go this long into January.
correct. I kind of would agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we'll be back next week then to talk about the results of the playoff games and any more transfer portal craziness on the Nebraska side of things. We'll obviously discuss at that time. We're still waiting to hear back about our defensive line coach. Sounds like it may be somebody from the NFL, which is why we haven't heard any confirmations yet.
Yep, that's correct. And I don't know who that might be. I sure hope it's a splash higher though. But the problem is, if it was somebody that was going to bring an ooh and an ah, that they would have been telling recruits that. And so far, we've struck out pursuing our D line portal, players. So it does not look good in terms of what's going on there in Lincoln.
All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed listening to this podcast. You can email us at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for us via College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. You can subscribe to us there, leave a rating or a comment. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.